Day 7 of the struggle in Ukraine, the war between Russia and Ukraine. In this video, we will talk about the security situation. This is an update about what is changing about the cities and the problem of civilian. Second, we will talk about a communique that had been made in Saturday and it had been removed just after. It was a communique from the Russian Federation and it was a communique about the victory. And this victory, of course, didn't happen. What is very interesting in this communique, so we have a full understanding what was the spirit and the mindset of the Russian Federation. It will give us some understanding of what they want to achieve in the future. And we will talk also about the consequences of the sanctions in Russia. What is important to understand is in the first 48 hours, minimal forces, I think that no more than 3 divisions had been engaged on the Ukrainian soil. And also the doctrine was to protect the civilian as much as possible in the Russian doctrine. Now I clearly see around the day 5, 6, I clearly see a turning point and more forces are involved. Probably I would say at least 60 or 80% of the forces are now engaged on the Ukrainian soil. And I see also a change in the doctrine. Now more civilian or administrative buildings are engaged. Also, in some places, the Russian prevent civilian flee. The situation in Kiev starts to be desesperated for civilians. So it's turning like a real war with all the atrocities coming next. And many civilians are trapped in the area, and unfortunately, I think it will get worse and worse and worse. The military situation is a lot of forces are surrounding Kiev, but now there are also, this is the city mayor that is saying this today, Kherson is invaded, and who knows, maybe it will fall close. The junction between Crimea forces and Donbass forces still going on. Mariupol is under high pressure and already under bombardment right now. My advice for relatives in Ukraine, if possible, they should get away from any military key points or strategical key points, which means basically any airport, any big military factory, any bridge on the Dnieper, for example, and if possible, to leave the strategical cities because those cities are likely to be, and they are already under big fight, and it will be worse in the future. The best is to leave the eastern part of Ukraine and to go to the western part of Ukraine, or simply to flee and to join the Polish border and be welcomed as a refugee in Poland, if possible, because it's very difficult now. It's very difficult to move in Ukraine right now, and it will be more and more difficult, simply. So if you have dacha or your relatives have dacha in the countryside, I believe that is the best solution. There will be also some problems with food, more and more. This problem will be more intense in the next day in the big cities that are especially surrounded by the Russian Federation. 100%. That will be a big concern. I want to talk about the text that had been Saturday displayed on some Russian media. That was a mistake, so the text had been removed. This is very interesting because such victory communique was simply showing what the Russian Federation was expecting and the achievements that was attended. And of course, the goals that they wanted to accomplish. So it's very interesting because it gives the real geostrategical, political, and what was the military purpose. It is highlighting the situation for the future. And I believe that after 1 week of struggle, nothing has changed. Military speaking, I told you that they are engaging more forces and they are likely to change somehow the strategy, but the political leadership hasn't changed. About the declaration of victory, this victory didn't happen. I will not read all the text because it will be very boring. This is English translation. It's not so good, but we have to deal with this. I did the summary because it will be easier for you to understand what is the main forces of this text. Of course, it's about restoring the Soviet power, and the second thing that is said in this text is that the president of Russia has the historical responsibility to not let happen the disintegration of the Russian land. And the Russian land is included Russia, of course, and Belarus and Ukraine. Very important to understand this. What are the reasons to regain Ukraine? There are two main reasons. The first one is about national security concern, to not let Ukraine becoming an outpost for NATO and the European Union that could treat the national security of the Russian Federation. The second reason, and that's very interesting, that will be more difficult in the future to prevent the de-Russification of Ukraine. De-Russification of Ukraine. And there is one word that is, in my opinion, this is the most important word in the whole text, in the whole project, to not let the Ukrainian to be decoded from the Russian soul and to re-encode them. It's very significant, in my opinion. The Ukrainians are being encrypted, and so the Russian Federation need to re-encrypt them. This notion is very capital because it gives you an hint about the whole project of the Russian Federation. And what will happen is the size Ukraine. It's explaining why they have talked about the Nazi regime in Kiev, because they are believing that this regime is the one was captured the soul of the Ukrainian people and prevent them to gather with the Russian people. Because in fact, the position of the Russian Federation through those words used in this text, and this is why it's so important to read this correctly, in my opinion, for them it means that they have been encoded, encrypted by some Western intervention and some Western propaganda. So I would like here your commentary on the commentary section in this video, because of course that would be very interesting. I imagine that you are right now understanding and watching some parallel of what's happening not in Ukraine but in another country. I let you guess which ones, of course, and so you can make your opinion about this. In the document, it is said also that they are considering the unification of Europe possible because Russia has allowed, after the fall of the Curtain era, the unification of the eastern and western part of Germany. So again, if you have some commentary about this, because the unification of Europe started with the European Community of the Steel and the Coke in 1952. CECA, purely and simply. So for me, there is like an historical mistake here. I don't really understand this paragraph. It is said also that the West is too weak to keep or to take Ukraine, but Russia, the Russian Federation, has such strength. So, what is your opinion about this again? They also say something important. The West thinks that the relationship for Russia with the West is of vital importance, but it's not. They are stating here that the relationship and the links between Russia and Europe are not vital. They are surely right about this, about the resources, gas, and petroleum. I'm not a specialist in exploitation between Russia and Europe. I believe that it is true. For the rest, if there are dependency between Russia and Europe, we will know soon because the level of sanction is right now so high that if those goods were vital for Russia, they will suffer from this very quickly. So they talk also about the problem of Europe that cannot achieve its autonomy because Europe is ruled by the USA. This topic is interesting because, of course, it has some truth. Somehow, the question is quite valid. Now, the mistake is that Europe has showed just recently in the last days, unfortunately, that they could take common decision or at least decision aiming towards the same goal, push some sanction on Russia. Germany has taken an unbelievable decision to improve its military budget. And also, this is an historical decision, Switzerland has decided to get out of its usual neutrality, which is very unique. The last thing very surprising for me is that the Western sanctions are already striking hard the Russian Federation. First of all, today the ruble is exchanged 120 rubles for $1, which is historical up, and they couldn't pay with their phone because some American application, have stopped this, and they couldn't use some of the credit cards also. So you need to know that in Russia, many prices are based on the dollar. So when the ruble is devaluated of 30%, and immediately people are suffering because, for example, the loan are based on the dollar. It means that if they have a loan on an apartment, they are instantly paying 30% more, which is insane. Because of this of this devaluation of the ruble, the Russians are knowing that something is going on. Because in every crisis, the money is devaluating. They know this for 30 years. They are used to this. It's just like a strong signal saying there is big that happened. And the effort of the Russian Federation to dissimulate the complete and full offensive on at least half of the Ukrainian territory has failed. They wanted to hide this with the media, telling the just, we have some forces to push up the Ukrainian in the Donbass to help the separatists. But in fact, this whole camouflage has fallen down because now every Russian everywhere can understand very quickly that something big has happened. And so even if some are not knowing about the actual war, they will know very quickly. The weight for the credit have raised up from 8 to 20%. 20%. The position is to prevent shorters to short the ruble, to put it down. But on another side, of course, because of the rise of the interest of the credit, people will suffer also because the credit will be, of course, much, much more expensive.